Okay. Everybody ready to get started?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. When we last left off, we had finished the war with Jericho. Bnei Israel had a tremendous and miraculous victory. All they did was circle the walls, and the walls got swallowed into the ground. There was a fantastic miracle, which was a powerful welcome to the Jewish people to the land of Israel, or as it was known then, the land of Canaan. Now, chapter 7 begins on quite a different note. It says, "Vaymalu b'nei Israel mal b'cherem," that the Jews used the spoils of the war, which they were not supposed to. They dedicated all of the spoils from the war of Jericho to Hashem. As we explained earlier, since it was their first victory, they just like you give your firstborn animals, etc., to God, your first grains, your first fruits, everything goes to God. So too, the first capture, everything will go to God. Also, He's the one that did all the fighting. So they gave all the spoils to God, or at least they dedicated to it. The concept of cherem is one where the Sanhedrin and the king come together and they invest this very spiritual and serious punishment onto anybody who uses the property for their own benefit. It's more than spiritual. In fact, it's actually it warrants a capital punishment. Anybody misuses the property. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to quickly recap the chapter. We're about to summarize it, and then we'll go into detail. And I have some questions for you. Hopefully, you'll have some solutions for me. So it says the introduction is that they misused the spoils of war. Somebody benefited from the spoils. What happened was there was an individual named Achan from the tribe of Judah, of Yehuda, and he took some fancy spoils that he liked, a very nice cloak, etc., which we'll see later, some money, and a golden vessel, and he used it for himself. And he didn't use it, actually, he hid it in his house. Then the Jewish people, unbeknownst to them, they didn't know about this thing with Achan. They go to fight the war against Ai. Yehoshua sends spies beforehand. He says, go spy out the area. And the spies are very lax about their job. They just go into Ai. They don't go to the surrounding area of Beit El and to survey the entire region. Rather, they just look at the very small city of Ai, which has at most like 12,000 people in it. And they say, Yehoshua, we got this. Don't even worry about it. You don't have to send a tremendous amount of soldiers, 2,000, maybe 3,000 soldiers. Let us go in there. We'll take care of it. Hashem's on our side. So we begin the chapter with like an overconfident, almost like a cocky, or like taking a lot of self-credit, the Jewish people. Sure enough, they go in there and they come right out. The people of Ai come fighting against the Jewish people, and the Jewish soldiers, the 3,000 soldiers, they send to flee from the city. And it says that 36 of them died. 36 Jews died. And this is a big problem. Although casualties are a normal thing in war, but that's in normal wars. When it comes to Milchemes Mitzvah, especially in the wars that Yehoshua was fighting to conquer the land of Israel, there was a promise that not even one soldier would perish. God was on their side. Hashem assured Yehoshua that God was on his side again and again and again, and you need not fear, and you need not worry. And now suddenly, 36 soldiers died. Yehoshua rends his garments, and he cries, and he's devastated, and he pleads with Hashem. He says, Hashem, what are you doing? It's going to be a chil. We should have just stayed across the Jordan. We would have been happy over there. We came in here, and now you're making us fall in front of our enemies. Now they're not intimidated by us anymore. We're doomed. All 31 kings, or maybe it's 30 now, are going to come against us. They're going to destroy us. And also, he says, it's going to be a desecration of your name. It will be a chilul Hashem. So Hashem says to him, Yehoshua, what are you crying to me for? This is your fault, or it's your people's fault. You guys benefited from the spoils of war of Jericho. Yehoshua says, who did it? Really? Who took the spoils? So in the Gemara inserts the conversation. And God says, I'm not telling you, I'm not a v'chidei I'm not a gossiper. I'm not going to tell you who did it. You could draw lots. And with a divinely guided lots, you can figure out who did it. Sure enough, they draw lots, the tribe of Judah, the family of Zerach, etc. and it falls on the person Achan, who eventually confesses, although he tried to deny it, and then they put Achan to death. They eradicate Achan and all of his property from their midst. Achan does teshuvah, and then they go to fight Ai again, and they succeed in the next chapter, in chapter 8. Okay, that is a very fast-paced summary of chapter 7, more or less. We're going to go into more detail, but I want to open up with a question for you. It will seem like a trick question and very straightforward, but that's why I think it's a good one. What is the reason that the Jewish people lost their initial battle with Ai? Why didn't Hashem make them succeed? Why did they fall in battle? What would you say from the simple reading of the text?
They weren't supposed to take spoils for themselves.
Yeah, I would agree to that. They weren't supposed to take the spoils. The opening line was the Jews took the spoils from themselves, and then they lose the battle, and Hashem says it's because somebody took the spoils. So it's explicit in the text that the reason is because they took from the spoils. But therefore, I have one or two questions for you. You ready for it?
No.
Number one is, the commentaries chastise the soldiers in the beginning of the chapter. It says in verse number 3, Vayeshuvu el Yehoshua v'emru elav, the spies came back to Joshua and they said to him, Aliyah al kol ha'am k'alpayim ish, all we need is 2,000 people. We don't have to worry about it. The commentaries say this was a bit too cocky of them. Maybe it's because of this that they suffered. It's as if the Rishonim are looking for excuses to figure out why they failed in the battle. They're blaming it on the overconfidence of the soldiers, which is strange. What are you looking for excuses for? The text tells you that they died because of the spoils. It's further than that. God Himself, in verse number, if you have a book in front of you, I'll read it to you. If you don't, in verse number 10, Hashem responds to Yehoshua. Yehoshua had just fallen on the ground, pleading with Hashem for mercy, and like, what are you doing to us, God? So in verse number 10 it says, Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, kum lach, which means get up. That's what the word means. Get up. Why are you falling on your face? It's because somebody took from the spoils, he continues. So Chazal pick up on the words kum lach. And they say, Hashem was telling Yehoshua, lach, it's your fault, Yehoshua. In the Torah and in the beginning of the book of Joshua, I told you, you should go out before this people. Ata tavi ta'am. You will go out before this people and take them into battle. And it says throughout the Torah, referring to the appointment of Joshua, it says we will appoint somebody to go out with them and to bring them back. What does go out with them mean? It means to go out to battle with them. Joshua, you sat back while they went out to battle. And that's why they failed. They failed because Joshua didn't go with them to battle. That's what God was telling Joshua. The question is, God, didn't you read the 7th chapter of Joshua? It's the reason they failed in battle is because they took from the spoils. So whose fault is it? Is it the overconfidence of the soldiers? Is it perhaps because Joshua sat behind the lines and didn't go to war with them, didn't go to battle with them? Or is it the explicit reason in the text of taking from the spoils of war? You hear the question here? The text gives a clear reason as to why the Jewish people were defeated. And here we have in Chazal and Rishonim 2 other reasons also.
Okay.
That's a problem. Any thoughts? Share either what I've discovered. I'd like to hear if you have any reactions or thoughts in the meantime.
The people didn't trust enough in God also.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead. In which instance do you see that?
Well, they were very lax about their spying, and they also figured they could get away with taking spoils. And where is the trust? Where is the honor?
Very nice. Saying that there's a common thread between the different issues that are pointed out here. Taking the spoils shows like, oh, and like I deserve the spoils of war. It's my I take the credit. And if they're being lax in their battles, it's like, oh, it's I'll be protected. I deserve protection from God. It's almost, it seems to be a common thread between the two different mistakes that they made. I think that's a very important point. I'm heading in that direction. Any other thoughts from anybody out there? Right, so picking up on what Mrs. Wolpert said, I would say is,
Shall I
wanna-
say something?
yeah, go ahead, Marati, me, your mother.
No, maybe because they look like they take it for granted that everything deserve to get whatever, and they can do whatever they want. No, it's a very disrespectful situation the way they behave. They didn't put the really most effort to the whole thing. First, the spy goes in without trying. They don't put an effort. They know, oh, it's easy for us. So that's like a chutzpah, you know? So
Yeah.
Hashem wanted to shake them up and tell them, hello, wake up. It's not something that comes naturally. You really have to work for it. And as the last person said, they didn't have enough emunah and bitachon. So that's why, small
Very nice.
thought. Okay.
Very nice. So I agree with you both Mrs. Wolpert and my mother, who neither woman I can disagree with, both greater and wiser than I am, and therefore I'm agreeing with you both. I would say I'd like to bring proofs to what you're saying and build on it. In the parsha of Lech Lecha, we have a mention of our battle. It's only alluded to, but we have a mention of it. Lech Lecha is when Hashem tells Abraham to leave the land of his birth and go to Israel. And when he arrives in Israel, it says he camps on a mountain, Bein Beit El V'Ha'ai. There's a mountain that rests in between the city of Beit El and the city of Ai, the very city that the Jews are trying to capture now. And suddenly in the Torah, it says he builds an altar and he invokes the name of Hashem. He calls out in the name of God. So Rashi says, what are you suddenly building a Mizbeach for? Why are you suddenly calling out Hashem's name? Rashi says, Abraham prophetically saw in his Nevuah that the Jewish people are going to be going to stumble in this very place of Ai. And he prayed for them that they should be protected and not suffer too severely. This is very significant. It's Abraham specifically who's praying for the Jewish people in the situation of Ai. Abraham is the one who was saved from Ur Kasdim. He was saved from the fiery furnace that Nimrod threw him in. He said, do you believe in God? Well, you go in the furnace, right? And Hashem saved him miraculously. Later in his life, what does Abraham say? Anuchi afar va'efer. I am dust and ashes, meaning to say, I should have been just dust and ashes. I was thrown into a fire and Hashem miraculously saved me. I don't even deserve to be here. How could I even open my mouth before you, Hashem? Which means Avram was the individual who exemplified this idea of not holding any credit for yourself. When God is supporting you and God's behind you and God's making miracles for you, you never pat yourself on the back and say, wow, I really deserve all this goodness. Avram says, I'm ashes and dust. Hashem, I don't deserve any of what you've done for me. It's only in your great kindness. And so it's that Avram who's trying to embed that into his future generations. Don't get too haughty. Don't get too cocky. So what's happening here in Ai is a bit of a failure in this regard. The sin of Achan in taking the spoils is really the same sin of the spies who were lax in their duty, as my mother and Mrs. Wolpert said. Really, it's the individual, but it's also reflecting on the entire nation. They all felt like Hashem's going to take care of us. We deserve this. You know, we're best buddies with God. And in fact, I even, you know, I can even take some of it for myself, because, you know, right? It's like over presumptuous, assuming too much, taking too much credit for yourself. And therefore the sin of Achan is really the same sin of the people. And that's why perhaps the entire people are punished for the sin of Achan. There was one individual who sinned and everybody was punished. They lost in a battle, which was a devastation for the entire people. Okay, so that perhaps is an approach to wrap up the different threads of what the Jewish people did wrong.
What was the purpose of conquering Ai?
So the Jewish people now are on a mission for the next 14 years. They have to conquer all of Israel. Hashem commanded them, I want you to go in there and eradicate all the Canaanites, to get them out of there and take it over for yourself. The Ai was a part of Israel, which they needed to live in. So they took Jericho, 1 down, and 30 to go. And Ai was their next stop. They needed to conquer it to live there.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
So whenever Israel, maybe I missed this from an earlier session, but whenever Israel fights against another group, they're not allowed to take any spoils?
No, that's not, no. Only in this particular case of Jericho, since it's, first of all, their first battle, and also it was totally Hashem's doing. They said, we dedicate all the spoils to God. And then this individual violated that.
Okay.
That's why he was punished. But we'll see now, interestingly, in the battle of Ai, we'll get to now, we'll see that they were allowed to take spoils. They did take them for themselves. And the reason is because they had a lot more personal involvement. In the coming chapter, we'll see they had an ambush and a whole strategy of how they're going to fight and what they did. There's a lot more human involvement, so now the humans get to take the spoils. But in Jericho, those spoils belonged to God because they dedicated it to him.
In the case where, let's say, they find a golden idol, are they allowed to break it up and melt it down, or it has to be just buried in, that's the end of it?
That's a good question. I don't recall. If you find an idol, can you melt down the gold and then just use it? I don't recall.
I would think the first thing you'd have to do is to damage it. So
You
that
certainly have to destroy it. The question is, can you like reconstitute it and then just use it for jewelry or whatever? That I'm not sure. I
Mhm,
suspect not, but I don't remember.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a question here that everybody, all the classical commentaries grapple with, and that is, the plain meaning of the text is one individual Achan sinned, and the whole nation suffered. 36 people died. And why is that allowed? Why is that fair? How could you punish everyone for the sin of the individual? The Torah itself says, "Ish b'chat'o yumat." A man should die for his own sin. I'm not going to care. I'm not going to punish other people for his own sins. So there are two approaches. I'll just give you two quick. There's two approaches here. Number one is the Jewish people are one unit. We are in fact not many individuals, right? We're one solid unit, and therefore, if a finger decides to cut itself off or to damage itself, that actually affects the entire body. So it's plain illogical that all the Jewish people should suffer because of that. That's one way they say it. The Malbim and the Ralbag suggest another also very instructive and also true approach, and that is all Hashem did here was remove his divine protection from the Jewish people. They were on a level of perfection and closeness to God. They merited divine hashgacha pratis, protection. But the moment they dropped from that level, doesn't matter whose fault it is. Once they drop from the level, the hashgacha leaves them. They no longer have Hashem's special protection. And therefore, now they're susceptible and vulnerable to their enemies, etc. So it's not a direct punishment. Hashem didn't say, Achan, you sinned, therefore I'm killing 36 people. Since Achan sinned, Hashem removed his special protection from the Jewish people, and now they're vulnerable and exposed to all kinds of attacks. Yeah. I forgot to mention before, the reason Hashem criticized Yehoshua for not going before them in war, he was saying that if you went before them, Yehoshua, if you were serving as a model and you went before them in war, they would be on such a high level because of your closeness that despite the theft and despite their sins, they would still merit the hashgacha pratis. That was the idea over there, just to plug that in. Now, perhaps you've heard this before, but if you see in the opening verses, when it describes the 36 people, it speaks like an American. You know what it says? Like 36 people. Yeah, the Torah says like 36 people died. It doesn't say 36. It says like 36. Kesh loshim v'shesh. Where's that? That's in verse number 5. Vayakumahem anshe Ai. The men of Ai struck the Jewish people. Kish loshim v'shisha ish. Like 36. So we say like while we're speaking because it's become a habit. But when the Tanakh says like, it means something different, obviously. What does it mean like 36 people? So Chazal say, yeah, you have an answer, Shmuel? You unmuted? Approximately, yeah. I mean, but 36 is a pretty specific, if you're going to approximate, it should be 35 or maybe 30, 40.
Right.
36 is a very It's an oddly specific number. So Chazal say, really, this is referring to one individual. One person perished who had the weight of 36 people. 36 is significant because it's the majority of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is 71 sages, and 36 of them represents the majority. There was one person in that battle who died, whose name was Yair ben Menashe. Yair ben Menashe was such a great sage that he would carry the weight of the majority in the Sanhedrin. People would, when they had doubts, they would look to his opinion to see what he had to say, because it was probably the truth. And that's how great he was. He was of such high spiritual stature and such a great person that he was weighed like 36 people. So it's not actually 36, it's like 36. So that either means that only one person died, or amongst the 36 people that died, you had this person, Yair ben Menashe, who died amongst them. Now, you may recall Yair ben Menashe from Parshas Matos. He is actually from the tribe of Yehuda, which is interesting because Yehuda is the tribe of Achan, who sinned. I always wonder if that has a connection. Also, it's noteworthy because he's actually living in the Transjordan, Me'aver HaYarden. Even though he's from the tribe of Yehuda, he's called Ben Menashe because he follows after his grandmother's lineage. He basically became an adopted Menasheite. And Moshe gave him the area on the Ever HaYarden. He gave him a bunch of cities, which he called Chavot Yair. He didn't have any children, so he named the cities after himself. And that's exactly why he's in the front lines over here. You recall Reuven and Gad and half of Menashe, they promised to go in the front lines of war. The truth is, I think it was just Reuven and Gad, but it's interesting. Now you see also Menashe here was in the front lines of war, and he perished in this battle of Ai. So that's who actually is one individual who weighed 36, who weighed like 36. Okay. Let me let's jump now to the sin of Achan. If you see now, verse number 11, Hashem says to Yehoshua, I'll tell you what happened and why you lost in battle. It says, Chata Yisrael, v'gam avru et briti, asher tziviti otam, v'gam lakchu min hacherem, v'gam ganvu, v'gam kichashu, v'gam samu b'chleihem. Which in English reads, the Jewish people have sinned, they also violated my covenant, and they also took from the spoils, they also stole, they also denied, and they also put it in their vessels. It says also 5 times. Which is very interesting. Right? Basically, just say Achan stole from the spoils of war. What is all these alsos? So Chazal say the 5 gams correspond to the 5 books of the Torah. Achan was actually a pretty awful person in his lifetime. He did teshuvah in the end, but during his lifetime, it's like he violated all 5 books of the Torah. He had complete disregard for the Torah. And the Talmud talks about all kinds of sins that he had committed. But regarding to this particular sin, these 5 different accusations are all very relevant. It says, Avru beriti, they violated my covenant. Do you recall what day of the week was the Battle of Jericho on? Do you remember what day of the week it was?
I'd say Friday.
Friday, close. Yeah, your day off. Your day off. It was on Shabbos. The Battle of Jericho was on Shabbos. And what's significant about that is, if Achan took from the spoils of war, that's not a part of the battle. To fight a battle on Shabbos, you're allowed because that's part of the commandment of the war. That overrides. But to take from the spoils on Shabbos, there you're transferring from the public domain into your own private domain. That is Chilul Shabbos. So Achan actually violated Shabbat. That's what Hashem means. Avru beriti, they violated my covenant, referring to Shabbos. Right? Is the bris between us and Hashem. And that's why we'll see that his punishment was stoning. That's the most severe type of capital punishment for somebody who violates Shabbos. Then it says, Lakchu min hacherem, that's the actual thing he committed, was he took from the spoils of war. And then it says, Ganvu, they stole, which means he did it in secret. That's an additional criticism. Not just that you did something wrong, but you did it in secret, in hiding. That means, who are you afraid of? You're afraid of human beings, and you're not afraid of God. That's an extra disrespect to God. Somebody who steals in hiding is showing that I have higher regard for humans than I do for God.
So robber is as bad as a burglar, is what you're saying.
Yeah, in
Is
a
that
sense,
correct?
that is correct. Yeah, that's right. That yeah, as like the Gemara Bava Kama speaks that out explicitly. At least the person who mugs somebody in broad daylight, at least he's a fool and he's a sinner, but at least he's equating man and God. I don't care who sees me. But the one who sins in private and steals, like Achan did, he's saying, as long as man doesn't see me, I'm safe. But that God should see me, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So I
And
have
it
a
says-
question. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry. So Acha, you said he made a tshuva when? What he was?
In the end,
Both.
we're going to get to that in a moment.
Oh,
right?
because they stoned him. You said.
They stoned them, yes, but we learned a very important principle from Achan. We'll get to that in one moment. Just want to finish this list of 5. We said first he violated Shabbat. He took from the spoils of war. He did it in secret, which shows that he shows man is more significant than God. He denied it. We're going to see that even after he was singled out, he kept denying that he did it. And then and finally, Samu Bichleihem, they put the spoils of war into their vessels. Achan didn't even need the stuff. He buried it deep under his yard as like a treasure. I can, like, as if to say, if he was stealing so he could eat, okay, you're still a thief, but you stole a loaf of bread so that you can eat. There's some compassion over there. But to steal just to have a couple of extra things, in your china cabinet, that's already a chutzpah. So it's trying to magnify the chutzpah. You see from here just beautiful how sometimes the Navi, the prophet, when it writes, it looks like it's very verbose, but every word is trying to bring out another layer of depth and another lesson of significance. Right. So in these 5 different gams, in these 5 different alpsos, it's pointing out the various elements of Achan's sin. Okay, so now we're going to get to identifying the thief, because we know that it was Achan, but how do they find out? So Hashem says, eradicate the sinner from your midst. It says in the morning, figure out which tribe is chosen, and then select the family, and then select the home, the house within the overall family, and then select the individual. So how did the selection process occur? First, the tribe, then the mishpacha, then the bayis, and then the individual. How did the selection process occur? Yeah, Shmuel, you had something to say?
Because it's being done this way, giving him a chance to admit to it before he's found out. Is
Very
that
nice. I was
why
going to
it's-
ask you, why do you think that they like belabored the process so much? Maybe it's in order to give Achan a bit of a redemption, that he can come forward himself, at least save himself a bit.
It's also an embarrassment to his family and to his tribe.
Exactly. That's another point.
As they point each one out, that would have been at least the very least he should have done is at that point admitted,
Yeah.
rather than further embarrass anyone.
Very good. Excellent. The truth is, I suspect that's also why it was done this way, because an individual does not exist in a vacuum. He was raised by parents who lived in a community, who was part of the whole area, right? The city that they were in. And what Achan did reflects on all of those. It reflects on the whole Jewish people, but specifically on his tribe, and certainly his family, and certainly his immediate relatives. So the Torah is trying to bring that out over here, that all of these people are somewhat more culpable than the rest of Jewish people. But now, how was the selection process done? So there are 2 different opinions in Chazal. The one is that it's a very interesting one, because the language here is Asher Nilkad. That means to be trapped. I don't know how to translate in English. Forgive me, I don't have the translation in front. But the tribe which will be trapped is the one that is selected. So Nilkad means they would pass each tribe. They had one representative of each tribe go in front of the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark. And the tribe that was selected would get frozen. They would be trapped in place in front of the Holy Ark. So they would bring somebody from the tribe of Reuben, he would just walk by. Shimon, Levi, and then when Yehuda walked by, boom, he was frozen in front of the Ark. Okay, so we know it's somebody from Yehuda. Then they would bring a representative from each family, and they would pass them in front of the Ark. And the one that got stuck there, we know it's that family. Very interesting selection process. Obviously using, like the divine tools at their disposal. And the second opinion is of how they did this is to select the tribe. They checked the Choshen Mishpat, that breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore. Each tribe had a stone with their name on it. Right? Reuven had the first stone, and it had the name Reuven on it. And Levi, the tribe of Yehuda, their stone was dimmed, darkened, and that indicated that that was the tribe that was suspect. And then they drew lots, just regular old lots. I don't know if they drew straws or something. No, they drew lots. Probably. Then they identified the family of Zerach, and they identified the family of Achan, and finally Achan himself. So you would think after such a selection process, Achan would fess up. Sure enough, Yehoshua has to plead with him, please confess. What Achan said was, listen, you drew lots. If you drew 2 lots, one for yourself and one for the Kohen Gadol, Yehoshua, one of you is going to be picked. Inevitably, somebody's going to be picked by lots. Who says that that's accurate? Right? Who says? He continued denying it. And what's very severe about that is, and when all these wars are over and done with, the way they're going to divide the land of Israel is through lots, drawing lots. Don goes to this area because he gets that lot, etc. If you cast any aspersions or any doubts about the lot, you're going to mess up the whole system. So Achan here was doing something very dangerous by questioning the lots and saying they're not accurate. So Yehoshua pleads with him in verse 19. Yehoshua says to him, stop it at once. B'ni, my son, sim na kavod l'Hashem. Please give honor to God. V'ten lo todah, and confess to him. V'aged na li ma'asita, al techacher mimeni. Don't deny it anymore. Number 1, don't make the lottery suspect. That's what we're saying. And now, number 2, this is getting back to your point, to my mother's point. This is where we see Achan confesses. Yehoshua was instructing him, listen, we're about to put you to death. From here, you're going to set a precedent. Anybody who was ever convicted and is now they're about to carry out capital punishment and put him to death. Kol hamumatin bi'ad beis din. In other words, they all have to confess, or they ought to do vidur, like we did on Yom Kippur, and that makes their death an atonement for them. And in fact, the Talmud says that Achan, after he confessed, which he does in the next verse, Achan is atoned, and his death serves as a kapara, and he becomes a tzaddik. He's taken into the next world clean. He went through this painful process of death, and he comes out clean. The Talmud says because Yehoshua will say to him, on this day you have darkened us. On this day, but in the world to come, you're clean. So in verse number 20, we have the confession of Achan. Vayan Achan es Yehoshua vayomar. Achan responds to Yehoshua, Amna anochi chatati l'Hashem. Indeed, I've sinned to God. V'kazot v'kazot asiti. And I have done such and such. So Chazal pick up on that and say, what does it mean? V'kazot v'kazot asiti. I've done such and such. At this point, Achan reveals, Yehoshua, this ain't my first this ain't my first offense. Not only did I take it from the spoils of this war, I took from the spoils of 2 other wars in the days of Moshe. Kazot v'kazot. I've done this and this. I've done what I've done now 2 other times. In the days of Moshe, there were 2 other miraculous battles. One after the death of Aaron, the Canaani came and fought with them, and another one with the nation of Midian. And Achan is confessing, I actually took from those spoils as well. And so now we see he's actually utilizing the opportunity right before his death. He's utilizing the opportunity to do vidui and be atoned for all the sins. And that's why at 120, when a person's on their deathbed, it's very important we give them an opportunity to do vidui, that their death should serve as a kapara for them. And that's what Achan was doing over here. He was doing vidui, he was confessing all of his sins before they put him to death. You can, yeah, go ahead.
It says here that in the commentary it says they stoned his animals. So I don't understand the purpose of that. Is that basically saying this is his wealth and they destroyed it? I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to give these, these animals, I don't know, as a sacrifice or something like that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you notice, it says all of Israel was invited to this occasion. And they, which means whenever we're inviting everyone to an occasion, we want to make an impression on them. And we're trying to show them, look, everything associated with this person has been destroyed. We killed him, we burned his tent and his possessions, and we even stoned his animals. There's nothing of value that comes from a sinner. If you leave God, you're in the complete darkness. So we don't want to even use any of it. We're not going to make any benefit from this person's sinning and death. We just want to show everyone and make a point. He's out of here.
Right. And his family was not affected. That was it. I mean, like they weren't punished in any way, shape, or form.
Correct. According to the Talmud and most of the commentaries here, it does say that his sons and daughters were told to come, but they were not. They were just told to come to watch, so they could also be impacted by like, wow, we better distance ourselves from that behavior. But they survived. Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many goodies here. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Let's I just want to show you in verse number 21. He says what he did wrong. He says, "Vayir b'shalal aderet shinar." I saw a cloak from Shinar. Does anybody know where Shinar is? Eretz Shinar. I think it's coming up. It's in Parshat Noach. Shinar is
That part of the Tower of Babel?
very good. Excellent.
Gotcha. Okay.
Very good. Shinar is the land of Bavel, Babylonia, where the Tower of Babel was built. And Achan found a cloak from there in Jericho. What's it doing over there? And it was a beautiful one, apparently. It was all white and it was coated in this chemical. So Rashi explains that every foreign king didn't feel satisfied with his kingship until he had property in Israel, some palace or something. Everyone had to have, their apartment in Israel. So the king of Bavel, of Babylonia, of Shinar, he built a palace in Israel, and it was in Jericho. In that area, it was around that area. And he would keep this cloak over there that he would wear every time he arrived. And Achan happened upon that cloak. And he said, oh, I got to take this for myself. That's what that cloak was doing there. So within this description of the spoils of war, we're seeing actually a praise for the land of Israel. That other foreign kings so desired the land of Israel. They thought it was so beautiful, so special. It's like that's the paradise you want to have, a piece of property. And even if you have your own kingdom over there in Babel. It also is telling us a bit of his rationalization. He said, look, it's not really from Israel, so maybe I could use it, right? A person rationalizes it. Anytime we do something wrong, we never tell ourselves this is wrong, I'm going to do it. We explain to ourselves why this is actually not a problem. It's really okay. It's from Bavel, it's not from Israel. It's probably not the spoils that we were forbidding, etc., etc. That's just one little small note about that. It is worthy to note over here. There's a tradition we have. It's brought down from the Seder Hayom and the Megala Amukos, two of the early Achronim. I believe the Seder Hayom is a Rishon, in fact. So we're talking about early, over 1,000 years ago or so. A little less than that, actually. Excuse me. Let me get to the point of his reading here. Yeah. Yes, Achan composed a very famous prayer right before his death. And that is the one that we say 3 times a day. The second paragraph of Aleinu. Al Kain Nekaveh Lecha Hashem Elokeinu. That's it, that final paragraph, right, of Aleinu. When we yearn for Hashem to reveal His oneness upon all of mankind, the first 3 words Al Kain Nekaveh begin. Al was Ayin, Kain is with a Chaf, Nekaveh is with a Nun. It's Roshei Tevos. The first letter of each word spells the name of Achan. He signed his name in the second paragraph of Aleinu. Him and Yehoshua composed this prayer together as he was being led to his execution, which is a beautiful testimony to his teshuvah. Okay, I hoped to get to chapter 8 today, but I don't want to hold you too late. So God willing, we'll get to that next time. I appreciate you all coming out to learn.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
We got to get out of here.